Human blood sprayed the walls as ravenous werewolves tore into the screaming settlers, the lichen virus consuming the last uninfected world in the Theseus cluster. In a dimly lit Breen medical lab, far from the carnage, Dr. Linux hunched over a microscope, his third eye squinting at the latest sample. Months of research and still no cure. Linux, you need to rest. It's spreading too fast. Dr. Zargon, Linux's graying mentor, squeezed his shoulder with a prosthetic hand. He pulled up a hologram of the mauled colonies, the death toll in the billions. Linux slammed his fist on the lab bench. I can't stop, not while people are dying. The virus rewrites DNA, transforms them into monsters, and it's about to claim 3 more systems. Zargon shook his head sadly. The Council's considering a complete evacuation. Everywhere the lichen virus touches, it's a death sentence. No species can resist it. All we can do now is quarantine those worlds. Let the virus burn out on its own. What? Abandon all those people? There has to be another way. I'm sorry, Linux, we don't have a... An alarm klaxon drowned out Zargon's next words. A monotone voice boomed over the intercom. Alert! Unknown vessel approaching quarantine space. It's human. Linux spun to the doctor, his mouth agape. The humans? Are they insane? Are they flying straight into the infection? Zargon gripped the edge of the table, his eyes distant and grim. No, Linux, they're flying in to help. But if they can't find a way to stop the spread... He swallowed hard, unable to finish the thought. Linux looked up at the flashing red emergency lights, imagining the horrors those humans would soon face. If they couldn't do the impossible, humanity would join a long list of species erased by the lichen menace. He had to warn them before it was too late. The view screen on the Breen flagship crackled with static before resolving into the stern features of Admiral Curzon. A jagged scar ran down the grizzled officer's cheek, terminating at a glinting cybernetic eye. His first officer, Commander Thrasix, stood at his side, sleek black fur contrasting with Curzon's battle-worn visage. Thrasix leaned towards the control panel. The human ship is hailing us, Admiral. Curzon nodded curtly. Put them through. The image on the view screen shifted, revealing a human male with close-cropped brown hair and intense blue eyes. Admiral Curzon, I'm Captain Noah Boyd of the UES Nightingale. We're here to help. My team has been tracking the lichen virus outbreak, and we believe we can assist in developing a cure. Curzon's organic eye narrowed. Captain Boyd, while we appreciate the offer, I must strongly advise against any attempts to land on the infected worlds. This virus is highly contagious and lethal, unlike anything we've encountered before. Boyd's mouth set in a grim line. With all due respect, Admiral, we're well aware of the risks. Our medical personnel have experience dealing with similar viral epidemics on Earth. We've brought advanced medical equipment and a team of our best doctors and virologists. Thrasix turned to Curzon, his voice a hushed whisper. Admiral, we can't let them go down there. It's suicide. Curzon inclined his head in agreement before addressing Boyd. Captain, I cannot in good conscience allow you to endanger your crew. The Breen Council has decided to quarantine the infected systems. We're preparing to evacuate any survivors and let the virus burn itself out. Boyd's jaw clenched, his eyes flashing with intensity. And what about those who can't be evacuated in time? Will you just abandon them to die? Curzon remained silent, but Boyd pressed on. I understand your concerns, Admiral, but we can't just sit by and do nothing. If there's even a chance we can save lives and find a cure, we have to try. That's what humans do. We don't back down from a challenge, especially when innocent lives are on the line. Curzon glanced at Thrasix, a long look passing between them before turning back to Boyd. Very well, Captain. You have the Breen Confederacy's permission to attempt a landing, but be warned, if your crew becomes infected, we will have no choice but to quarantine your ship as well. We cannot risk further spread of the virus. Boyd dipped his head solemnly. Understood, Admiral. We'll take every precaution. Nightingale out. The view screen went dark. Thrasix turned to Curzon, brow furrowed with concern. Do you think they stand a chance? Curzon sighed heavily, his gaze distant. I don't know, but one thing is certain. Humans are either the bravest beings in the galaxy, or the most foolish. In the dimly lit medical facility, Dr. Linux paced back and forth, his tail swishing anxiously behind him. He glanced at the monitor displaying the human ship's progress, his brow furrowed with concern. "I can't believe they're actually doing this, Zargon. They're putting their own lives at risk for complete strangers." Zargon, seated at the console, nodded slowly. "It's not the first time, you know. Humans have a history of this sort of thing." Linux stopped pacing and turned to face his colleague. "What do you mean?" "Have you heard of the Zephyr plague that hit the Coraxians a while back?" Zargon asked. Linux shook his head, his curiosity piqued. "It was a brutal virus. Resistant to every treatment they tried, the Coraxians were on the verge of extinction." Zargon leaned back in his chair, his eyes distant. But then, out of the blue, a human medical frigate arrived. They had a new, experimental cure based on their experience with a similar disease back on Earth. Linux's eyes widened. "And it worked?" A smile tugged at the corners of Zargon's mouth. "Not only did it work, but the humans shared the treatment with the Coraxians and helped them mass-produce it. They saved an entire species from annihilation." Linux was silent for a moment, processing this new information. But why take such a risk? What's in it for them? Zargon shrugged. "That's just how humans are. They have a saying on their planet. With great power comes great responsibility. They believe that if they have the ability to help, they have a moral obligation to do so, even if it means putting themselves in danger." Linux opened his mouth to respond, but was cut off by an urgent beeping from the console. Zargon leaned forward, his eyes scanning the readout. "The human ship has landed on the infected world. They're deploying their medical teams as we speak." Together, they watched the live feed from the planet's surface, their hearts racing as the humans, clad head to toe in protective gear, ventured into the quarantined city. Time seemed to stretch out before them as they waited for any sign of trouble. As he watched, Linux felt a growing sense of admiration for these brave humans, willing to stare down a nightmare virus for the sake of others. He closed his eyes for a moment, silently praying for their success and safety. As the hours stretched into days, Linux found himself unable to tear his gaze from the monitors, transfixed by the data streaming in from the planet's surface. The human medical team worked with a tenacity and dedication that left him in awe, their efforts relentless in the face of the daunting task before them. "Zargon, look at this," Linux said, his voice trembling with excitement as he gestured to the screen. "The humans, they're making progress. They've managed to isolate the viral strain and are working on a targeted treatment." Zargon leaned in, his eyes widening as he studied the data. "Their technology is remarkable," he murmured, shaking his head in disbelief. "They've accomplished in days what would have taken us months." Linux brought up a new set of readings, his fingers flying across the console. "And that's not all. They've also set up a temporary hospital and are treating the infected Breen. They've managed to alleviate the worst of the symptoms and are keeping the patients stable." Zargon's brow furrowed as he examined the images of the human doctors, working alongside the Breen medical staff, their protective gear a stark contrast to the familiar uniforms of their colleagues. "The infected Breen aren't attacking them?" he asked, his voice laced with confusion. "But the virus should have turned them feral by now." Linux pointed to a specific set of readings, his eyes alight with understanding. "The humans are using some kind of pheromone therapy to keep the infected calm. It's a technique they developed to treat a similar condition in their own species, something called rabies." Zargon shook his head in wonder, a smile tugging at the corners of his mouth. "They never cease to amaze me. They're not just brave, they're also incredibly resourceful and adaptable." Linux nodded in agreement, his gaze drifting back to the screens. "And compassionate. Look at the way they're caring for the infected, treating them with dignity and respect, even at great personal risk." As the two Breen scientists continued to monitor the situation, their admiration for the human team only grew. They watched as Captain Boyd himself visited the makeshift hospital, offering comfort and support to the patients and their families, his presence a beacon of hope amidst the chaos. Linux turned to Zargon, a newfound determination burning in his eyes. "We can't let the humans do this alone. We need to support them in any way we can. I'm going to request permission to join them on the surface." Zargon placed a hand on Linux's shoulder, his grip firm and reassuring. "I'll come with you. Together we'll show the galaxy what can be accomplished when different species work together in the face of adversity." As the gravity of the situation sank in, Linux felt a chill run down his spine. He turned to Zargon, his voice trembling slightly. "Zargon, do you realize what this means? Dr. Reeves is willingly subjecting herself to a fate worse than death. She's going to become one of those monsters, all in the name of finding a cure." Zargon nodded solemnly, his eyes distant. "It's a level of bravery that defies comprehension. To knowingly face the horror of the lichen virus, to allow it to consume you, all for the sake of others. I can't even begin to imagine the strength of will that requires." Linux shook his head in disbelief. "And yet she's doing it without hesitation. She's not just risking her life, she's sacrificing her very humanity. How can anyone be so selfless?" Zargon placed a comforting hand on Linux's shoulder. "That's just it, isn't it? Humans have this incredible capacity for selflessness, for putting the needs of others above their own. They're willing to make the ultimate sacrifice if it means saving lives and ending suffering." Linux felt a sudden surge of emotion, a mix of admiration and sorrow. "I just hope her sacrifice isn't in vain. If anyone can find a cure, it's the humans. But they're racing against time. Every moment that passes, the virus spreads further, claims more lives." Zargon nodded, his expression grim. "We have to do everything in our power to support them. Dr. Reeves is giving up everything to buy us time, to give us a fighting chance. We can't let her down." Linux squared his shoulders, a newfound determination burning in his eyes. "You're right. We'll join the human team on the surface, provide whatever assistance we can. If there's even a chance we can help them find a cure, we have to take it." As they prepared to depart, Linux couldn't shake the image of Dr. Reeves from his mind. A lone human, facing down the nightmare of the lichen virus, all for the sake of a species not even her own. It was a testament to the incredible compassion and courage that seemed to define humanity, even in the darkest of times. Zargon's voice broke through Linux's thoughts. "Come on, Linux. Let's go show the galaxy what can be accomplished when different species work together. Let's go help the humans save the Breen." You have reached the end of the story. If you enjoyed this story and want to support us, please leave a like and subscribe to our channel, and for every comment that says 88, I will heart every single one of them. Thank you for your time.